Thank you for staying with us. We did tell you that in the course of this bulletin, we'll be speaking with the co-founder, BudgIT, Oluseun Onigbinde. He joins us now for some perspective on the budget that was presented earlier today by President Bola Tinubu. Thank you very much for joining us. I guess we should just start with how realistic, in your view, is the projected 34.8 trillion naira revenue target for 2025? And do you think that enough strategies was captured that will enable government to meet that target?
Thank you so much. And that was, I think it was a bold move by the current administration. And I mean, there's always a thin line between if something is bold or if it's credible. What we have seen is a 34 trillion naira proposal. The president also mentioned that in the first 9 months of this year, the administration has made a revenue of 14 trillion naira. So if you adjust that for the full year, you might be looking at a total revenue at the end of the year of somewhere around 20 trillion naira. So if 2023 is looking at ending around 20 trillion naira at the highest, why are we looking at 34 trillion naira? I mean, that is, a significant growth in some sort of way. So I worry about the numbers around that. We saw a hint of that in the MTF document, which was a 2005 to 2027 MTF document. If you look at that document, there was a whole lot of expectation on revenues from the oil industry. The sale of oil is where the federal government is pitching its tent for significant rise in revenue. And we don't know how realistic that is, considering the fact that a lot of those oil production has been encumbered by NNPC. A chunk of all those oil production also, a lot of it also belongs to the IOCs or the private producers. So we don't see the realistic nature of bringing something from 4 trillion naira. We know there's been devaluation, but we don't see you moving for like around 4 trillion naira, what the federal government used to receive, to coming close to somewhere around 20 trillion naira. So I don't think this is extremely realistic. There's a challenge here is that the government is trying to reduce inflation, bring inflation to 15% as projected in the budget. But in the same vein, the same government also is not applying any fiscal consolidation or expenditure rationalization. And if you put that side by side, it just looks like they are working at cross purposes. But when we look at the details, we're able to see what more sense does this make at the end of the day. As you can see, non-debt recurrent expenditure is 14 trillion, capital is 13 trillion, debt servicing is a whooping 15.4 trillion naira. Shows that we're going to spend a whole lot of money on managing, servicing debt, or even retiring some of this debt. So it's something worrisome in our own view.
What's your thoughts then on the projected improvement on the exchange rate by about 200 naira? That's from 1.7 to 1.5 per dollar, and how that might impact businesses?
I think for the exchange rate, there's a bit of realism that's come into play about that, because if you look at what the federal government has proposed, 1,500 naira to a dollar, that seems like what is the realistic rate at this moment, because over time we've played games with that exchange rate. But I think at this point we've come to a point that this is where we want to pull up the anchor. And if you have studied the CBN platform, we would see clearly that the exchange rate has hovered within the 1,500, 1,600 corridor. So it seems that there is a understanding by the monetary authorities that is where exactly they want to anchor the exchange rate, somewhere around 1,500. I don't think the devaluation is a problem of businesses. Yes, it adds to their cost. It's the uncertainty that comes with fluctuations. That's what the businesses are afraid of. So if I'm buying dollar today at 1,500, and I know that in another next 6 months it's 1,500, 1,520, I can plan with that. But if dollar is 1,500 today, in another 2-3 months it's 1,700 and 1,800, then it becomes highly distorting for most businesses. So there's a bit of a certainty that has to come at this point. And I think Most systems can withstand the weakness of the currency at varied periods, but what you don't have is just sudden shocks in the exchange rate market. So what people will be looking for is that the federal government should start smoothing the curve at this point.
I'm curious, do you laud the amount allocated for debt servicing? And having that in mind, how sustainable is the current debt profile in the context of economic growth?
I mean, 15 trillion naira debt service seems unheard of. And it will come from the fact that recent times we have started borrowing a lot from foreign partners, and we have a whole lot of debt that are due for retirement next year. So it just means that the federal government would spend by the time you borrow debt, possibly at 200 naira to a dollar or 400 naira to a dollar, you're paying back technically at 1,500. Also shows you the challenge or the content or the risk, the pricing risk for most of these foreign debt. If you take in naira, you're going to pay back in naira, irrespective of the inflation that's crept in over time. So I think the federal government is also something to also be careful about. We're spending 15 trillion on debt servicing. We're spending 13 trillion on capital expenditure. Well, I mean, we all know that capital expenditure, if we manage to do 70% of that, that would be a big plus. For debt servicing, you would likely find around 90 to 98% of that fully exhausted. So it's something to worry about. That it's also still not normal that our debt servicing should take at least more than a third of our entire budget. We're not running a public finance, and by the time you bring it to the actual numbers of what is actually spent, you find that debt services will still be around 45 to 50% of the total expenditure of government. Highly unacceptable.
Oluseun, thank you very much for speaking with us. I'm sure our business desk will be coming to you in the coming days for further analysis. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.